And welcome to another episode of The Architecture of Health. My name is Deb Voisin, yoga survivor and late bloomer mover. And our guest this week is Ankoor Bhattacharjee from Fractal.biomechanics. Welcome to our show today. How are you?
Thank you, Deb. It's an honor to be on your podcast, and we used to talk a lot on Instagram regarding movement and breathing. So it's great to be interacting with you today after a long time, and I'm looking forward to this.
And you're all the way over there in India. And the funny story I have for the audience is how I met. How did I meet this guy in India who helped me on my hips after I thought I was a world expert on how to move well? And what happened is I was in this movement camp for 3 weeks studying sort of active biomechanics, like how do you move within your biomechanical ranges, and yet breath wasn't clearly defined as a primary driving factor. And so what happened is my hips my hips that are very unstable got way less stable until I saw your post on Instagram that said hip issues are breath issues. And it had never occurred to me how close the diaphragm and the psoas and all the organs are to that hip joint. So I called you, I hired you, and within one session where you just had me shift how I breathed and what position I was in one session, I saw a before and after photo where my center of gravity suddenly changed. I had never seen someone's overall posture change that quickly within 1 hour. And that's what I see you consistently post on your Instagram account. You take a client photo from the first session to the second. You teach people what they can do, what practice they can do in their everyday life. So let's go back though to how you acquired this expertise, because almost all of us that get excited about something enough to start a new business, almost all of us had some sort of crash or awakening to switch from one career to another. So let's start, like, how did you get into this field?
So I'm Ankoor Bhattacharjee, as Deb mentioned, and my business name and my Instagram ID is Fractal Biomechanics. So I was a corporate employee till 2018. It required me to sit um, for 10, 12 hours nonstop, and that was not something that I liked doing. And I had a passion for the human body. I loved the human body. And back then, I thought that if I do not make a switch right now, I would be regretting this for the rest of my life. So if nothing happens, I can come back. Worst case scenario, we have to prepare for the worst case scenario. Like nothing happens, I come back. I left my job and started studying. First started studying CSCS, which is a popular strength and conditioning certification in US. So I started studying that because I wanted to clear the uh, toughest exam that there is, which is the CSCS. Then when I cleared it, I did an internship at a soccer club. And when the internship ended, I came back home and immediately lockdown started. The COVID lockdown.
Oh, the lockdowns.
Yeah. So everyone's locked up in their homes, nothing to do. So I thought to myself that, okay, let's use this period to upskill myself. And how do I do it? The number one idea that clicked in my mind was, let me get in touch with the coaches and clinicians who are in the US or in the Europe, or let me connect with people worldwide. I feel I can gain a lot of knowledge, and exchange of ideas can happen when I connect with people worldwide. I then opened up Instagram and I started building a network that way. I started building a network. Okay, I know this guy from the UK. I know this guy from Sweden. I know this guy from the US. It all happened. Suddenly, it was August 2020 that I found a post. It was like static stretching is kind of useless, something like that. And it shattered my beliefs because I did all the certifications just prior to this, and
Ah,
my beliefs were shattered. Like, what is going on? And then, so I believe, I would like to believe that I'm a very open-minded person. So what I did was I ended up DMing that person. We had a lot of chat, and that person, he told me, okay, so this is a big market void as traditional rehab and rehab to performance. It's not up to the mark even in the US. So I thought to myself, if it's not that great in the US, I'm pretty much sure it's not great worldwide as well. So what I did, I asked him, how do I proceed in this? And he told me, go do Postural Restoration Institute courses. I ended up doing those. And I had some light bulb moments. And that was really enlightening when I got to know this. Like, this is how the human body is and how it functions, how it works, the asymmetries and all. That was pretty enlightening. And he told me that a lot of people are in pain and this is a big market and you should go out and help more and more people because a lot of people need help. I started experimenting it on people whom I knew. So I started with family, because at lockdown you only have access to your family. So I just started implementing it on them, and they started to say to me that I feel better. My brother used to say I feel better. My mom used to say it feels good. What you have done, my back is relaxed. So that kind of motivated me even more. And then the biggest turning point was a friend of mine who had left sciatica issues for over 1.5 years, and he could not sleep well, stand well, walk, sit, every life was hell. And he told me that I've seen your Instagram, you're starting to post about some breathing and everything, pelvis, rib cage. So my spinal surgeon has said that surgery is the only way out for me, and there is nothing that can help me, and surgery is the only way out. So can you help me? uh, at that point I was a beginner, and I was like, a spinal surgeon saying this, like, do I know more or do I have any other way? I don't think I'm equipped to handle this case. I There's a lot of self-doubt that you have at the beginning of your career. So he said that what worse can it happen? Like, what worse? Like, if already
Right.
surgery is
Is
the
this
last.
is it as invasive? I hear this a
Yeah.
lot. People don't account for how invasive the
Yeah.
surgeries are, and nor do they look at the empirical evidence that many of those perform worse than posture shifts or even
Mm.
simple movements. So, and yet there's this pressing, urgent need to resolve the pain because there's no way to live when you're in pain. So you had these, you were starting small and slow, and then you started to solve bigger and bigger problems. And
Yeah.
tell me the name why fractal? What does that have to
Yeah.
do with the what you teach?
So with that guy, his one, I said I'm a beginner, I'm going to just implement whatever I know. He said, do whatever you want to. And in one session I did a very bad implementation of left adductor pullback. I did it on him, and guess what, in 2 sessions his pain was gone. And that was a jaw-dropping moment for him and even more for me. And that is when I decided that, okay, this skill is going to pay my bills from here on. I'm here to stay now. So that was the foundation. That moment I still remember. Now, how does the fractal biomechanics come in itself? Fractal means pattern repeating itself. And when I got to study about all this stuff, I got to know that, okay, so the pelvis, rib cage, cranium, everything, they're just repeating itself at just various levels. So I think, okay, pattern repeating itself, what name should I keep? And then suddenly the word fractal came into my mind. Like, okay, fractal biomechanics. That's, I think, a very good name. I loved it. And
Pattern repetition. Yes.
repeat, yes, pattern and pattern and patterns. So my logo, it's a curve. If people see my logo, it's a curved line. It's not a line, it's a curve. So people wonder what is it. So it's actually the diaphragm. So it's bigger half. The bigger half is the right side of the diaphragm. The smaller half is the left side of the diaphragm. So a
And
simple
let's
logo which depicts what you do.
Yes, and pattern, the most important pattern we have is our breathing pattern. And the pattern of whether that diaphragm in your logo, whether it has the ability to fully move and be
Huh.
this and act as this
Yes, yes.
piston, this repressurizing piston. And what I found you know, especially great about this field, that this area of work that you practice is, there are some practices where people are like, oh, release, release. You're releasing over here. And there are other
Mm-hmm.
practice where it's like tighten, tighten, tighten. But when
Hmm.
you get the freedom of the diaphragm to move, every joint then relative to the diaphragm, everything relative to your center, your deepest core, also starts to move in this
Yes.
harmonious pattern. Just tell me about, what are some of the patterns you see in your clients that they're trying and are not working?
The body is asymmetric. It is asymmetric. There are research on this. Now, the thing is, asymmetry is a natural thing which the nature has given us. The problem occurs when the asymmetry gets really out of hand, when one side starts dominating way more than the other. It's the right usually. It's the right with all humans. So, because of that, you will see people over and over. I've seen people in the same structure, like their postures, as they say, predictable patterns. They get into predictable patterns. So that is what I have seen. And because of that asymmetry, there are a lot of muscles. Because of that asymmetry, they become shorter, which means they're constantly tense. And they feel a lot of muscle tightness or stiffness around an area. And that can also result in the uh, in joint pain, wherever it is, ankle, knee, pelvis, wherever. So I see what they do, or what the traditional methods that they have been prescribed by the previous practitioners or coaches is stretch and strengthen. So you stretch something, stretch what is tight, contracted, and strengthen what is loose or lengthened. So stretch what is tight and strengthen what is loose. That's like the big thing in the rehab world,
All
traditional rehab world.
mostly muscle based too,
Muscle,
right?
yes, yes. So what is not accounted for is the way someone breathes, the way someone's organs move, the way someone's joint positions are in space. That is something that is not being addressed. It's only muscle centric rehab model that's going on right now.
And
And
that
that,
leaves out the wiring, the neurological connections. It leaves out yeah, and the breath is a bridge that
yes,
wires, that both repressurizes and it takes slack out and puts pressure in and distributes it in a holistic way.
yes, exactly. So when your diaphragm and pelvic floor have that movement excursion going on, where the organs can go down in an inhalation and go up in an exhalation, you will have good amount of joint movement fluidity in the body. When that does not happen, there is a stagnancy that occurs, and that stagnancy, and that add to that the asymmetric bias towards the right side, that can create issues in the long run or even in the short term. So no one
And
knows
and
how the symptoms will be, but yeah.
and we have something like 180 or 190 lymphatic, nodes in our abdomen, and that's our sewage system, and if it's not,
uh,
if there's stagnation there, and or waste matter, undigested food, if that's
yes.
not getting that movement. And I want to go back to what you said about asymmetry. So I was really, what I've seen in clients is they'll think they need to bring their MRI, they need to
Hmm.
bring their X-ray. They're like, I have, my right side, my right leg is long or short, my back. They think it's a very specific thing. Now, if there was a car accident or some other direct impact, that's a different story. But a lot of people come and they have no idea they're participating in a pattern that is 100% known in
Hmm.
terms of the right side tends to get short and compressed. No wonder my right hip is what was
Hmm. Hmm.
presenting as a symptom. One hip goes forward, one goes back. A certain amount of that, is accommodating the asymmetry of the organs because that's our design. But once, like you said, it gets out of balance, then locomoting forward, just the act of walking forward starts to interfere with the gait cycle and every other way you move. So
Yeah.
tell me, so that's a misconception people have, is that you need an MRI to
Hmm.
tell what you need to do, what you need to prioritize. And yet, what I also love about PRI and the other approaches that you teach, PRI is Posture Restoration Institute. The approach is that you get this the pressure, the intra-abdominal, you get the pressure of the trunk right. And what I believe I learned from you was also that we tend to have kind of a stuck extra inhalation as modern culture, and that a lot of it is missing the lower abdomen the pressure gets pushed down, the hips get pushed forward, and
Hmm.
there's a kind of stuckness that is
Yes.
happening. That's a really known pattern. Anything you want to say about that?
Yes. So the two models that I'm really influenced by is PRI, Posture Restoration Institute, and Bill Hartman. So he has been a huge, huge, huge influence in what I do today. So yeah, what you said is correct. Asymmetry, intra-abdominal pressure, everything is connected. Everything is connected. So if you are not getting that movement excursion, the diaphragm is not moving well, your pelvic floor is not able to push the organs up and then accept it, then stagnancy, definitely. And if stagnancy happens of fluids in the body, as you said, lymphatic system, it's not just the respiratory system that is in the scene right now. Every system gets affected. Circulatory system, everything, digestive, everything gets impacted. Now, if you don't drain the wastage, there's problem. Like your body will be a hub of toxins. So
And we have more lymphatic fluid in our body than blood. So again, we have this muscle model in fitness, which is the muscles and the blood. And what
hmm,
is the cardiovascular system doing? But the lymphatic system, the nervous system, the fascial, all the fascial tensional loads in our, carried through our structure. So one thing, okay, and of course, as a former yoga teacher and yoga survivor, I was shocked also to learn from you and your network of other forerunners in this, that belly breathing is a trap that can enforce the stagnancy of this extra pressure that's
yes,
being pushed down in the bottom of the abdomen. And then what we want is the freedom for the diaphragm and the breath to dome up, and that a lot of movement is happening in the rib cage. Tell me, is there anything you want to add about the misconception of good breathing is, quote, belly breathing?
yeah, belly breathing is something that I would definitely not recommend to anyone. What really happens is you do not get ribcage expansion. It's only the belly that's moving, and that will only exaggerate. You see people with pooch bellies. That's yeah. So that will only be exaggerated with belly breathing. If the breathing strategy is not changed, if it is not addressed, it will only go towards that direction more and more and more. The rib cage needs to expand in this case.
And what people also tend to get wrong is they think
Ha,
they just lift their rib cage and use their neck
correct.
muscles to breathe. That's why people are trying to get students to belly breathe, is they're trying to get them out of this arching neck breathing stuff. But and I've got to say, once I learned that we breathe on average 22,000 times a day, it occurred to me that any wise investor would invest here. But I have to like acknowledge that when we've been taught the wrong things about muscles or do more sit-ups, and we've been trained uh, to think that we should be belly breathing, of course we don't feel like investing in breathing. And that's what I love about your work is you can show me an immediate before and after that my entire nervous system has gotten in harmony with the greatest force of all, that is gravity. And that's a
Mhm.
complex dialogue. I cannot coach you like tuck your chin, move your shoulders, suck your gut in, bend your knees. And what I saw is that you have a way to very quickly realign someone with natural law, which is
Hmm.
the way we're designed to breathe and the way we're designed to relate to gravity. Um, and yet it's such a gentle activity. I still at times, knowing how important it is, can hardly force myself to do it. So how do you encourage people to get over themselves and do something super gentle that is one of the most powerful ways you can improve the quality of your life?
So usually my clients are the ones who are in pain and they want to desperately get out of it. So I don't need much of convincing
You don't
because
have to do much baiting along.
uh, I'm happy that way because I don't have to get into the convincing
The
domain.
cells.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
and
don't have to go there because
don't have to
they're
sell.
already convinced. They know, okay, this is how things are going to work. When they see some change, they get very excited. Okay, it means change is possible. It means I can create a lasting change. So they get excited. They get the positive feedback. So now, depending on how serious the issue is, there are some people who just have stiffness and it irritates them, and they just want to get out of it. They practice it just enough and they're out of it and it's fine. But there are clients whom I know who have had like massive issues, big pain, but they practice for like 1 hour, 2 hours a day. There are people who, it all depends on what your mind perceives that problem to be. Like if it is the topmost priority of your life that you want to get out of it, or it's okay ish, I can deal with it, and there are other priorities above it. So it all depends on what priority you give it. And I cannot cannot change that priority for you because it's your life and you know what other topics that you need to worry about. Like you might have,
Right.
one must have financial issues going on or personal life issues going on and neck pain at the same time. I cannot say this is the biggest problem you have. Like, no, I will show you the way. I will just ask you like what's a reasonable time that you can give me, like practice 15 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day. What's a reasonable thing that you can do it? So
Right. And
that's
even someone who's not super duper deep in pain, why not invest a couple of minutes a day in doing something you do 22,000 times a day? Like, why not? And that's one reason I have this show is, well, okay. And the other thing is when we commit and invest, like that person investing an hour or two a day, or even someone like, I actually need to do more because I did a stretch. I've avoided stretching for years now, many years. But then I started to go, is this an illogical fear? Should I actually go ahead and do as I should not have done that stretch? I'm going to have to be breathing an hour a day now, right now, honestly. But I know at least what I have is the one reason my logo for this show is the Fibonacci
yes,
sequence. It's the
Fibonacci. I saw that.
golden
I,
mean.
I liked it.
There's natural law, and when we go along with what nature already gives us and we nourish what's strongest and the most important, and it's true across cultures, it's true across human history, and that is there was a blueprint for how humans bodies hung in a field of gravity, and there was a blueprint about how, there's just a way a natural movement is. And that's what I love about your work is you can fundamentally use the plumb line of the body, how your weight is being distributed through your feet. You can take a measure and then you can remeasure. You can take a range of motion measurement of the hips or the shoulders and be like, well, before we did it, it was this. And after we did it, it was that. That's another tool I want my audience to have is don't just trust Don't just trust, verify. Like, "Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
this yoga thing is amazing. I could, I could stick my head in my bottom. I'm so flexible." That's what I used to do. I'm hypermobile, so I was a show-off yogi, and I was blasting out my hips, flaring my ribs, pushing to, like, and so now I know that has I'm 56 now. Now I know there's no wisdom in that. The wisdom is in the long course,
Yes.
moving with ease, elegance, power, freedom. So tell me one thing about your own. Well, another thing I want to address is you're talking about you can either add more of this practice in terms of time. You do this breath practice more time if you're re-architecting your system. But there are other stressors you have people add so that it sticks more, right? Like holding weights and using breathing practices in various positions.
Yeah. So as you get better with the unweighted versions, it's time to load it. It's time to load it. So that's the biggest goal. I want you to be. So, for an example, I get into a supine hook lying breathing drill. You get better at it. Now, start loading that position where you can do a alternating hook lying press to introduce rotation, or you do bilateral press depending on the goals. But you start adding weight so that it's a measure how chilled and relaxed and without holding your breath you can be as you add up load. The goal is
Add up.
to be the goal is to the theoretical goal is to add as much weight as possible while remaining as loose and relaxed as possible. Of course, there is this threshold that comes in where you have to hold your breath in order to lift the weight, but our goal is to increase that threshold, and that's the
Of
most important.
ease. And I want to add to that. That's been one of my biggest awakenings. Is once the breath is getting restored and the tissue is getting rehydrated and the fascia is starting to glide, then there's a suppleness that's more animal-like in the movement where it's enjoyable. Movement becomes enjoyable and kind of almost like a juicy, easy, smooth. I try to explain this to people, like when you touch a cat,
Mhm.
how their muscles are very, the muscle is very smooth and resilient, and they're never getting stuck. Versus when I was chasing external fitness goals, like I want to hold a handstand for a minute 5 times, I want to do this. When I got really deep into external goals, I had lost that. I lost sight of how much stiffness and tissue damage and stress that was interfering with my
Yeah.
basic human functions. So, and that again, you can, if your foundation, you build from the foundation of breath. And one thing you taught me too is the found how you are is also being expressed in how the pressure, how your feet are laying on the ground.
Yeah.
Um, it's almost always that fractal. You can look at the way the feet are, you can look at the way the hips are. There's always a reflection somewhere of your deepest core movement.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say about the feet?
Yes. So feet gives me an idea of what's happening in the body. If I look at a pair of feet, so someone who has their center of gravity, which means their body weight is much forward towards the toes, you will see two kinds of representation, either flat feet or very high arched feet, as they say. I'm I'm just representing two ends of the spectrum, like
Two ends of the spectrum. Rigid,
two
and I must say, rigidly high arches like I have are an extreme. It's end range, it's dangerous. So is rigidly internally rotated feet,
yes,
which is flat feet. What you've lost is the ability for the two bones of the lower leg and all the 26 bones of the foot. You've lost the
yes.
collaboration. Yeah. And what you teach people is how do you reclaim space and options on both sides of something that's more middle of the ground or middle of the road, right?
Yeah, so we need foot, pelvis, rib cage, everything. We need to change shape. Flat foot, high arch foot, it tells me that the foot just cannot change shape. It cannot
It's
pronate and
stuck.
supinate. It's stuck. It does not have the movement option that it needs to have. There are so many bones in the foot, so many bones, and they actually move with respect to each other. That's called relative motion. When you just step onto the ground, the foot slightly has an arch. As your shin moves forward over the foot, your arch flattens. Now don't confuse it with the flat foot. Arch flattens while holding onto the outer edge of the foot. What you see in the flat foot representation is that they collapse inward and the outer side of the foot is in the air. That is something that I
Right.
don't want. I want an entire foot spreading onto the ground as the shin moves over the foot and then supinates again as it moves in the air again in the swing phase of the.
So you want this ability for all of the structures to collaborate so that it
Hmm.
has the most healthy response to a variety of conditions. You don't want getting
Yes.
rigidly stuck. And what happens, as you're pointing out, is we get rigidly stuck is like, I am a flat-footed person.
Hmm.
And what people also don't talk about is, oh, the higher the arch, the better. I can't tell you how shocking it is for people to know I'm lowering my arches.
Hmm.
I'm remobilizing my feet, as I've discovered that's one of the reasons my hips ran out of space. Is I
Yes.
was already on one side. So you're and so tell me, so for the people out there listening, besides your awesome one-on-one coaching, I would love to give people direct steps to a practical change they can make. Let's start with something free. I know you mentioned supine, hook, lying,
Right. Yes.
breathing. That's the first level of this reprogramming people can do.
Hmm.
Is there a place that's easy for people to get some sense of? I mean, it's even better with you because you coach
Hmm.
precision and
Sure.
dose and path, but where can people start right now?
What people can do is in the day-to-day life, simple things which create a good change in the long run. Start with sideline. So if you're asleep, so you wake up, when you wake up or go to sleep, you're on the bed. So now be in a sideline position, left or right, whatever. Be in a sideline position, making sure that you do not crunch as you lie down and you do not extend. So you are in this naturally tall position where you do not feel any muscular tension of the chest or back. You do not feel either of those. You lie down there and very slow, gentle inhalation, exhalation. Just
Inhale
very
through the nose,
and
exhale
exhale
open
through the
mouth.
open mouth. If you are trying to get a lot of motion, then mouth. If you feel uncomfortable with the mouth, it's okay, start with the nose, no problem, but just do it slow and gentle and relaxed. Do not hold on to anything, no tension, just let go, melt on the floor or melt on the bed.
On the bed, wherever you are.
Yes.
And I want to because I know some of my students have been confused about this. Everyday breath, the design is nasal in and out. Um, and restructuring breath sometimes is in, it's always in the nose because the nose filters,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and it sets off a cascade effect of all sorts of other mechanisms of health and warming the air, making the air moist. It also shapes your oral posture, which then shapes everything else. But this very gentle, like, open mouth exhale, super
Huh.
gentle, super long, 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 long. That awakens in people like me that had a weak pelvic floor. That awakens all those deep muscles.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so you're saying that that may not always be the case, but that's one of the strategies people can use. And then what you're saying is just first thing in the morning or right before you go to bed, just lay
Yeah.
on your side, as relaxed as you can be, extend the length. Are you saying extend either side, the inhale or the exhale,
So I'm
or just
saying just
gentle?
I'm saying just lie down or have a tall shape from pelvis to the skull. You don't crunch or extend. You just stay relaxed. All the muscles are relaxed. You do not feel a single muscle in the body. Then just gentle inhalation, exhalation. When you inhale, do not shrug your shoulders up. Just let it be there. Just inhale, and as you exhale, and do not go towards the end where you are ending up forcing through your six pack. Lose six pack. I do not want
Six
six pack.
pack abs, sit ups, back bends can
Mhm.
really mess with your core pattern. And that's one other thing I learned is I could spend an hour a day repatterning my breath, but if I go and do a bunch of jacked up back bends and then try to do 80 sit-ups, I've just undone the pattern and
Huh.
I'm fighting myself. So I
Yes.
love what you're saying is the first exploration is get all this extra muscular tension out of the way. Get your container nice and long,
Yes.
let go and melt as much as you can, and this gentleness of the breath, that none of this struggling and grasping and
Yes.
striving.
Exactly.
So that's great. So people can practice that first thing in the morning. What's another step that you recommend
Supine.
people?
Go for supine.
Supine, hook,
Go for
line,
supine.
breathing. How do you learn to do that?
So you just lie down on your back on the bed with your knees bent, both the knees bent, and the feet, like the entire feet on the bed. So you get into a position where your hips, knees, and feet are kind of parallel to each other. So do not let the knees collapse towards each other, or don't let them go out. So you're in this, your thighs are parallel to each other. Now, same thing, just melt down, relax, and then you'll feel your entire back, your back of the pelvis, PSIS area, your heels just sinking into the ground, your back of the head sinking into the ground. And as you obtain that position, same breathing principles, gentle breathe in and gentle breathe out. You will see
Great.
slowly and slowly your rib cage expanding. If you are a belly breather, slowly you will see your pattern changing. It's going from only belly to rib cage and belly in synchrony. That's what we need. We don't need either or. We need both going up and down in synchrony. That's what we need. And also your
Great.
back rib cage will also expand at the same time.
And you know what happens is many of us who are sedentary like myself, the pooch belly starts and you assume it's diet or you're fat, but the body is protecting you. It's sending reinforcement to where you're sending that excess pressure. It's sending the fat, it's sending the liquid, and then the stagnancy develops. So the interesting thing is when you get that synchrony and the deepest muscles, the deepest core, not the superficial core, they start to get this synchrony, then there's that's the front of your body starts to support your lower back, like
Mm.
that pooch belly is your lower back getting compressed, and
Yes.
then as it starts to everything starts to distribute the work, then there's less force hitting the hip and less force. Oh, one last thing before we wrap it up. Well,
Hmm.
I thought it was so cool, you expressed to me how the older we get and the asymmetries
Hmm.
often get more and more pronounced because our
Yes.
liver's on
Yes.
the right, our lungs are three lobes on one side too. And I didn't believe this at the time, but you're like, how old people go, ugh, when they're
Yes.
getting up from a chair. And if you think about it, that's an exhale. That's kind of a desperate attempt to like
To
pull
produce
the
force. Yes.
produce force. And
Yes.
and 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 what your mastery is teaching people to distribute the forces and find this ease and suppleness we're
Hmm.
designed to have. So we're designed to feel good.
Yes.
Any last
Yes.
thing you want to tell? I gotta tell people this. You also, a lot of us think, oh, do I sit this way? Do I sit that way? Like, do I wiggle around while I'm sitting? And one of the last things I want to leave the audience with are two of the things I learned from you about whenever you can have one or two or both heels resting on the ground.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
sending a rest and digest signal to your nervous
Hmm.
system. And the
Hmm.
other thing, one of the other things I learned from you is when you're walking, you don't micromanage and try to control everything. That's a job
Hmm.
of the breath, but do look at the horizon
Yes.
and look and out of your peripheral vision, just see if your arms are swinging. Uh,
Yes. That's Hmm.
did I get those right?
Yes. Yes.
So the
Yes.
the starter is examine how you're breathing before and
Hmm.
after, before or after you go to bed, laying on your side. Second is you can look up, practice this supine hook lying breathing. They can also
Yes.
work with you to get more
Yes.
help on that. Third is this, the heels on the
Hmm.
ground,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
helps
Hmm.
your eyes know where you are and your whole body know where it is in space.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. This
Well, I love
this
your work. Yeah.
this simple stuff will help a lot of people. Of course, it's not as simple, so some might feel better, but then if if you need anything more, definitely I'm there to help.
Yeah, and just having the accountability that,
Oh yeah.
someone
Oh yeah.
making me do it really
Make
helped
you
me
do it.
get through
Yes.
a hard time. Yeah. So my audience can find you is on Instagram, your fractal
Dot.
biomechanics.
Yes. Fractal.biomechanics.
Fractal.biomechanics, and there's a lot of great free information that you
Oh
provide.
yes.
You show a lot of this. You show the skeletal models. You
Yeah.
explain what not to do. Um, and are there any other resources you want to point people towards?
Um, you can actually follow, if you're a coach or clinician, as Deb mentioned, she did a mentorship program where I was a part of as well. I was teaching there. I am a co-mentor there, so it is done by my boss and friend, Dr. Sean Astorga. You can find him on Instagram as Dr. Sean Astorga, and we do the AMP education mentorship where we coach coaches and clinicians about the human body. And yeah, this is the mentorship side of things, and there is this client side of things which I handle my own business, fractal.biomechanics. I help people, day-to-day life people, even some athletes who are in pain get better and then get back to their performance. So, and
Great. So
if you
there's
want,
a
just follow Postural
just
Restoration Institute and Bill Hartman, the two
the
the two
two other
models.
resources.
Yes, I am very influenced by. Go definitely follow this too, and you will learn a lot about the human body.
And they will probably find all of those things if they start with your Instagram account because you do so
Yes,
much
yes.
educational posting. And then that'll lead people to other places on YouTube. And I will say I did participate in the AMP performance education mentorship online. And so from a clinician level, that's one way to get exposed to this, to be able to
Hmm.
teach this and
Yes.
practice it. And then on a one-on-one level, working with you to fix our own biomechanical problems. All right. Well, I can't thank you enough. And that's a wrap.
My pleasure. My
Bye.
pleasure. Bye.